Commander Dae-jung stood in the observation deck of the council chamber, watching the stars spin around the neutron star below. He had been coming to this place for 3 years now, and still, the other species treated him like a child who had wandered into an adult conversation. The council chamber was massive, a station that orbited Axiom Prime, where representatives from thousands of worlds gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. Today's session had been particularly difficult. Dae-jung had proposed new trade routes through neutral space, routes that would help human colonies receive supplies faster and cheaper. The proposal was sound, backed by months of research and economic projections. The Vralian ambassador had laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the chamber. Other species joined in. The insectoid Krathani representative had clicked its mandibles in what Dajun now recognized as contempt. Even the peaceful Luminari, beings of pure energy who prided themselves on wisdom, had simply ignored his proposal and moved to the next item on the agenda. This was normal. This was how every session went. Dae-jung walked back to the human delegation quarters where Captain Hannah and Jiwon were waiting. Hannah was reviewing supply reports on her datapad, her military uniform crisp and proper. Guan, younger and still somewhat idealistic, looked up hopefully. "How did it go?" Jiwon asked. Dae-jung shook his head. "The same as always." They dismissed it without discussion. "I'll come around eventually," Giwon said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We just need to keep showing them we're serious, that we're not going anywhere." Hannah looked up from her datapad. "They don't see us as serious. They see us as a joke. We've been part of this council for 127 years. We still can't get them to listen to a simple trade proposal." It was true. Humanity had joined the galactic community with such hope. First contact had happened in 2720, when a Luminari scout ship detected human radio signals and decided to investigate. By then, humanity had already colonized Mars and several moons in the solar system. The Luminari had been kind, helping humanity develop faster than light, travel and introducing them to the council, but kindness and respect were different things. The other species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, some for millions. They had technologies that seemed like magic to humans. Matter replication, dimensional folding, consciousness transfer. Humanity's achievements, impressive by human standards, were primitive curiosities to them. The Vralian Empire controlled 200 star systems. The Krathani Collective had mastered genetic engineering to the point where they could redesign entire species. The Shardborn were crystalline beings who could survive in the vacuum of space without protection. And humanity. Humanity had finally figured out how to build ships that could jump between stars without taking decades. Late bloomers, they called humans. The talking primates. Some species didn't even bother learning human names, referring to them by number designations as if they were cargo shipments. Dae-jung had learned to endure it. He was a diplomat, trained to remain calm in the face of insults. But enduring was not the same as accepting. 3 days later, as the message came from New Boston, was a colony world in the Outer Rim, home to 50,000 humans. It was a farming world, peaceful and productive, supplying food to other human colonies in the region. The colonists had chosen the name to honor the Korean city on Earth, keeping their heritage alive among the stars. The Talon Syndicate had attacked without warning. They were mercenaries, pirates who sold their services to whoever paid enough. Their ships had appeared in orbit, demanded supplies and valuables. When the colonists refused, they had opened fire. 2,000 people died in the first hour. The Colonial Defense Force, barely 20 ships, tried to fight back, but were overwhelmed. The Talon Syndicate took what they wanted and left, burning agricultural centers and residential areas behind them. Dae-jung received the report while preparing for another council session. His hands shook as he read the casualty lists. Names of people he had met during a visit 2 years ago. Families. Children. Captain Hannah arrived within minutes of being summoned. Her face was pale but controlled. "I've already contacted the fleet. We can have 60 ships there in 4 days," No Dae-jung said quietly. "Not yet. We're bringing this to the council." The Talon Syndicate operates with protection from Council species. This is exactly the kind of situation the Council is supposed to address. Juan looked uncertain. Do you think they'll actually help this time? They have to, Daejun said. This isn't about trade routes or mining rights. This is about mass murder. The emergency council session was convened within 24 hours. Daejun presented the evidence carefully. Sensor logs showing the Talon ships. Communication intercepts proving they had been hired to raid human colonies, and most damning. Financial records showing payments from corporations, protected by 3 different council species. The chamber was silent as he finished his presentation. For a moment, Daejun allowed himself to hope. Then the Varelian ambassador spoke. This is unfortunate, certainly. The council extends its sympathy to the human colonies affected by this tragedy. Sympathy. Daejun kept his voice level. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for action. The Talon Syndicate operates with council protection. They need to be stopped. The Krithani representative clicked its mandibles. The Talon Syndicate operates in unregulated space. The Council has no jurisdiction over independent mercenary groups. They're not independent, Daejun said, his patience beginning to crack. They're funded by Council corporations. We have the evidence right here. Shardborn Counselor, its crystalline body refracting light in rainbow patterns, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Perhaps humanity should reconsider settling in dangerous sectors if they lack the strength to defend themselves adequately. The Outer Rim has always been risky for minor species. Minor species. There it was again. The session ended with a formal statement of concern and a promise to investigate the matter thoroughly. No sanctions. No action. Nothing but words that meant less than nothing. As Daejun left the chamber, the Varelian ambassador approached him with what might have been an attempt at sympathy. Commander, I understand you're upset, but you must understand the realities of galactic politics. Humanity is still learning how things work out here. Perhaps in another century or two, when you've developed more capabilities, the Council will be able to take your concerns more seriously. Daejun looked at the Varelian for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. It clarifies things considerably. That night, Daejun met with Captain Hannah and Juan in a secure room. He also contacted Admiral Tai Yang back on Earth through encrypted channels. On the screen, the Admiral's weathered face showed careful interest. We're withdrawing, Daejun said. From Council jurisdiction in 12 sectors, including all territories surrounding known Talon Syndicate bases. Juan looked shocked. Withdrawing? But that means we'll have no Council protection at all in those areas. We have no Council protection now, Hannah said quietly. At least this way, we can act without their interference. Admiral Tai Yang nodded on the screen. I'll begin preparations immediately. How long do we have? I'm making the announcement tomorrow, Daejun said. After that, we'll need 6 months minimum to position everything properly. It'll be tight, but we can do it, the Admiral said. What exactly are we preparing for? Daejun's expression was cold. War. We're preparing for war. The next day, Daejun stood before the Council one final time. His statement was brief and formal. Humanity was withdrawing from Council jurisdiction in 12 sectors. They would handle their own security matters from now on. All human vessels would be recalled from Council space within 30 days. Human representatives would remain in the Council as observers only. The Varelian ambassador looked almost amused. Is humanity withdrawing from galactic affairs entirely? This seems like an overreaction to one unfortunate incident. Not withdrawing, Daejun said calmly. Reorganizing. We will handle our own security from now on.
Yes.
As he left the chamber, he could hear the laughter behind him. They thought humanity was retreating in fear. They thought the minor species was running away to hide in its own little corner of space. Let them think that. Let them laugh. They would understand soon enough what humanity's silence actually meant. Walking back to the human quarters, Giwan caught up with him. Commander, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. Daejun stopped and looked at her. 2,000 people died on New Busan. The Council did nothing. They will never do anything because they don't see us as worthy of protection. We have to protect ourselves, Giwan. And more than that, we have to make sure this never happens again. How? She asked quietly. By making the cost of attacking humanity so high that no one will ever dare try again, he said. By showing them that quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means we're choosing when to speak. Far across the galaxy, on Earth and Mars and dozens of human colonies, the message was received. Admiral Taiyang began issuing orders. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels retooled for military production. Reserve fleets were activated. Scientists were diverted to weapons research. Intelligence operatives were deployed to Council space. Humanity had been patient for 127 years. They had endured mockery, dismissal, and contempt. They had tried diplomacy, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. Now they would try something different. Now they would remind the galaxy of something it had forgotten, that humans had not reached the stars by being weak. They had climbed up from caves and conquered their own planet through determination, adaptability, and when necessary, violence. The galaxy had mocked the quiet species. Soon, very soon, they would learn why humanity had been so quiet. They had been listening. They had been learning. They had been preparing. And now, war had been declared. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from Council jurisdiction. The galaxy had moved on, barely remembering the minor diplomatic incident involving the talking primates. The Council chambers continued their endless debates about trade agreements and territorial disputes. The Vrelian Empire expanded into 2 more star systems. The Krathani Collective unveiled a new biological art form. Life went on, as it always had. Nobody noticed that human ships had stopped appearing on the major trade routes. Nobody cared that human diplomats had become silent observers in council meetings, offering no opinions and asking no questions. A few species remarked that humanity seemed to be withdrawing into isolation. But this was considered normal behavior for a species still. Adjusting to galactic society? What they didn't see was the transformation happening in human space. Admiral Taiyang stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable. Watching construction reports scroll across multiple screens, every human shipyard was working at maximum capacity, running triple shifts without pause. But these weren't the civilian cargo vessels humanity had been building for the past century. These were warships designed with one purpose in mind. Status report, Taiyang said to his operations officer. All construction on schedule, Admiral. 73 new cruisers completed this month. Another 120 in various stages of assembly. The asteroid field shipyards are now fully operational and hidden from long-range sensors. Taiyang nodded. Those asteroid shipyards had been his idea. Human engineers had hollowed out massive asteroids in remote systems, building construction facilities inside them where satellites and passing ships couldn't detect the work. It was slow, expensive, and difficult. It was also invisible to Council intelligence. On Mars, Dr. Minji reviewed test results from the latest weapons trials. Her team had spent 6 months redesigning human military technology with one goal: making it effective against species with far more advanced defenses. The problem was simple. Council species had energy shields that could absorb most weapon impacts. They had point defense systems that could shoot down missiles and projectiles. They had sensors that could detect ships from light years away. Human technology was a century behind at minimum, so Dr. Minji's team stopped trying to match Council technology. Instead, they focused on overwhelming it. The kinetic saturation test was successful, her assistant reported. 16 simultaneous railgun impacts from different angles. The Varelian shield simulator collapsed after the 8th hit. Mingi smiled. Council shields were designed to handle powerful single impacts. They weren't designed to handle dozens of lower-powered impacts arriving at the exact same microsecond from different vectors. The calculations required to coordinate such attacks were incredibly complex, but human computers could handle it. What about the cyber warfare package? Minji asked. Also successful. We can now infiltrate Council standard communication networks within seconds. Once inside, we can feed false sensor data, disrupt targeting systems, and scramble encrypted channels. This was humanity's real advantage. Council species had been using the same basic technologies for thousands of years. Their systems were mature, stable, and predictable. They were also vulnerable to anyone who understood them well enough and was willing to exploit every weakness across human space.
Ow.
Military training intensified. Every human colony now had mandatory defense drills. Young people volunteered for military service, in numbers not seen since Earth's ancient wars. They trained in tactics that the Council had abandoned millennia ago: ambush warfare, guerrilla strikes, coordinated swarm attacks. Captain Hannah commanded one of the new stealth vessels. Ships designed around human ingenuity rather than borrowed Council technology. The silent verdict could jump into a system, deploy attack drones, and jump out before most sensors even registered its presence. It wasn't as fast as Council ships or as powerful, but it was quiet and it was deadly. Her current mission was surveillance. For 3 weeks, the silent verdict had been shadowing a Talon Syndicate fleet through neutral space. The mercenaries had grown even bolder since the new Busan attack, raiding shipping lanes with Council protection. They seemed to believe they were untouchable. Hannah watched them through her sensors, noting every ship, every movement pattern, every communication protocol. Her crew mapped the location of every talent base, every supply depot, every safe harbor. The mercenaries never detected the human ship trailing them like a ghost.
Dick.
They're sloppy, her tactical officer observed. Their security protocols are outdated. They're not even running counter-surveillance sweeps. They don't think they need to, Hannah said. They've been operating with impunity for years. Why would they worry about being hunted? She sent encrypted reports back to Admiral Taiyang daily. Every piece of intelligence was cataloged, analyzed, and incorporated into the battle plans being developed on Earth. Meanwhile, human intelligence operatives were spreading through Council space. Kyung was one of dozens of agents who had spent the past 6 months embedding themselves in alien societies. He worked as a maintenance technician on a Varelian military station, a job so menial that nobody paid attention to him. From this position, he had access to everything. He watched fleet movements, photographed military installations, copied communication protocols. The Varelians never suspected the quiet human who cleaned there. Corridors and repaired their systems might be gathering intelligence that would soon be used against them. Kyung sent his reports through a network of dead drops and encrypted channels that changed daily. He learned that the Varelian military was spread thin, maintaining control over their vast empire. He learned which officers were competent and which were political appointments. He learned about supply chains, maintenance schedules, and strategic weaknesses. Most importantly, he learned that the Varelians were completely unprepared for a serious war. They had fought small conflicts and police actions for generations, but nothing that challenged their fundamental superiority. Their military doctrine assumed that superior technology would always prevail on Earth. Military planners studied all this intelligence and created something the Council would never expect: a strategy based on human history rather than galactic convention. They looked at wars fought on Earth thousands of years ago. Conflicts where technologically inferior forces had defeated superior ones through cunning, determination, and unconventional tactics. The plan was called Operation Reckoning, and it violated every rule of civilized galactic warfare. There would be no formal declarations, no challenges to honorable combat, no quarter given to those who had shown humanity, none. The Talon Syndicate would be destroyed completely and absolutely. Anyone who protected them would face consequences. And if the Council tried to interfere, it would learn that humanity had been preparing for that possibility. 2.G1 struggled with the moral implications of what was being prepared. She had joined the diplomatic corps believing in peaceful cooperation and building bridges between species. Now she watched her people prepare for systematic violence on a scale humanity hadn't seen in centuries. "Is this who we want to be?" she asked Darjung during one of their private conversations. "Are we becoming the thing we fought against in our own history?" Dajon looked tired. The past 6 months had aged him. "We're becoming survivors. The galaxy gave us 2 choices. Accept that we're a minor species who can be attacked with impunity, or prove that attacking us has consequences. There is no third option, Juan. I wish there was. But the scale of what we're planning, she said. The Talon Syndicate will be C. Then those council species were protecting murderers, Daejung said calmly. We no longer recognize such agreements in territories where human security is concerned. He transmitted a data package to every council member. These files contain evidence of every Talon Syndicate crime against humanity, complete with proof of council species complicity. We have also recovered prisoners, including Vex himself, who will be tried under human law for crimes against humanity. Any species that objects is welcome to review the evidence and explain why they believe murderers deserve protection. The chamber fell silent. The evidence was damning, showing years of raids, kidnappings, and murders carried out by the Talon Syndicate. While council species looked the other way, or actively profited from their activities. This isn't over, the Vrelian ambassador said coldly. The council will discuss appropriate responses to this violation of galactic law. You're welcome to discuss whatever you like, Daejung said. But humanity is no longer bound by council military jurisdiction in our territories. We announced this 6 months ago. Nothing that has happened since changes that fact. He left the chamber without waiting for dismissal. A breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable from the timid human delegation of a year ago. On Earth, news of the operation spread quickly. Some humans celebrated the show of strength. Others worried about the consequences. The human assembly met in emergency session to debate what they had done and what it meant for humanity's future. Minister, Tsuji addressed the assembly with careful words. We have demonstrated our capability to defend ourselves. Now we must demonstrate our wisdom in using that capability. The galaxy will respond to our actions. We must be prepared for whatever comes next. What came next was a Vireliant fleet. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Talon Syndicate, 3 Virelian cruisers entered human-claimed territory without authorization. They were massive ships, each one capable of destroying a small planet. Their commanders sent a formal message demanding answers about humanity's military buildup and threatening sanctions. If humans did not comply with council oversight, Admiral Taiyang received the report and smiled grimly. They're testing us. They want to see if we'll back down now that they're showing force. What are your orders? His operations officer asked. Deploy Fleet Group 7, surround them, and send them a message. Within hours, human ships appeared around the Virelian fleet. The 3 council cruisers suddenly found themselves outnumbered 3-1 by vessels that shouldn't have existed. The Virelian commander, a veteran officer named Korvath, stared at his sensors in disbelief. Where did all these ships come from? Our intelligence indicated humanity had less than 200 military vessels. His tactical officer checked the readings again. Sir, I'm counting over 600 contacts. They're using jump technology we've never seen before. They appeared within weapons range before our sensors detected their approach. A human transmission arrived, audio only. Admiral Taiyang's voice was perfectly polite. Virelian vessels, you have entered restricted human territory without authorization. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and leave, or we will assume hostile intent and respond accordingly. Commander Korvath had been in the Virelian military for 40 years. He had fought in a dozen campaigns against minor species who challenged Virelian authority. Those species had always backed down when faced with superior firepower. He assumed humans would follow the same pattern. This is Commander Korvath of the Virelian Imperial Fleet. We are conducting a legitimate investigation into illegal military activities. You will stand down and submit to council authority. 20 seconds, Taiyang said. Korvath powered up his weapons. Confident that his ship's superior shields and firepower would make the humans retreat, all vessels, battle stations, prepare to demonstrate Vireliant superiority to these primitives. 10 seconds. Korvath's tactical officer looked nervous. Sir, they're not backing down. They're moving into attack positions. They're bluffing. They won't dare attack council vessels. 5 seconds. The human fleet opened fire at exactly 0 seconds. The attack was like nothing Korvath had ever experienced. Hundreds of railgun rounds arrived simultaneously from different vectors, each one calculated to hit at the exact microsecond. The Varelian shields, designed to absorb powerful single impacts, were overwhelmed by the sheer number of coordinated strikes. The first cruiser lost shields within seconds. Follow-up strikes disabled its engines and weapon systems. The second cruiser tried to maneuver, but human cyber attacks had already infiltrated its navigation systems. It drifted helplessly as missile swarms destroyed its point defense arrays. Commander. Korvath's ship took fire from 6 different directions at once. His shields collapsed. His weapon systems went offline. Emergency alarms blared. Throughout the bridge, as damage reports flooded in, the entire engagement lasted for minutes and 17 seconds. 2 Varelian cruisers were crippled and drifting. The third managed to jump away at maximum speed, leaving its companions behind. Taiyang sent another transmission. Disabled Varelian vessels, prepare to be boarded. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war and return to Council space unharmed. Your ships will be held as evidence of Council violation of human territorial sovereignty. Korvath sat on his damaged bridge, stunned into silence. The Varelian Empire had not suffered a defeat like this in living memory, and it had happened in minutes, against a species they had dismissed as primitive. The galaxy watched as reports of the battle spread. Human forces had just crippled a Varelian fleet without suffering a single loss. The implications were staggering. On dozens of worlds, military analysts began reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity. Intelligence agencies scrambled to understand how they had missed humanity's military buildup. Diplomatic corps across the galaxy sent urgent messages home. The humans were not what they seemed. Admiral Taiyang broadcast a message across all Council frequencies. His voice was calm, almost friendly, but the words carried absolute conviction. This is Admiral Taiyang of the Human Defense Fleet. As of this moment, all human-claimed territories are restricted zones. Any vessel entering without prior authorization will be treated as hostile. We no longer recognize Council military authority in our space. Any species that objects is welcome to discuss the matter diplomatically. Any species that attempts to enforce Council authority militarily will receive the same response as the Varelian fleet just did. We prefer peace. We will accept war. The choice is yours. The message ended. Across the galaxy, military commanders and political leaders faced an uncomfortable truth. The quiet species, the late bloomers, the talking primates, had just announced their independence from galactic authority and proven they had the strength to enforce it. The galaxy had mocked humanity's silence. Now they were learning what that silence had been hiding. A species that knew how to fight, how to win, and most importantly, how to make their enemies regret underestimating them. The Council chamber had never seen such anger. For 3 weeks, representatives from dozens of species had debated humanity's actions. Some called for immediate military response. Others urged caution. But the consensus was clear. Humanity could not be allowed to simply declare independence from galactic authority. The Varelian Empire was furious. The humiliation of their fleet had sparked outrage across their worlds. Their military command demanded revenge. Their political leaders demanded that humanity be brought back under Council control by any means necessary. High Admiral Korvax, Supreme Commander of the Varelian military, addressed the Council with barely controlled rage. The humans have violated every principle of civilized galactic society. They attacked without warning, rejected Council authority, and crippled our vessels without provocation. This cannot stand. We must respond with overwhelming force to restore order. The Crithani representative agreed. Allowing one species to simply withdraw from Council jurisdiction sets a dangerous precedent. If we permit this, others will follow. The galactic order will collapse. The Luminara counselor, usually a voice of peace, spoke reluctantly. I do not wish for war, but humanity's actions cannot be ignored. Perhaps a show of force would convince them to negotiate reasonably. Over 3 weeks of debate, a coalition formed. 7 major species agreed to contribute forces, the Varelians leading. Supported by the Crithani, the crystalline Shardborn, the aquatic Tideborn, and 3 smaller powers. Together they assembled a fleet of 1,200 warships, the largest military force mobilized in 2 centuries. The coalition's demands were simple. Humanity must return to Council jurisdiction, dismantle its unauthorized military installations, and pay reparations for the damaged Varelian vessels. The deadline was 72 hours. Daejung received the ultimatum aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony, now stationed in human space rather than the council chamber. He read the demands carefully, then composed a response that took exactly 3 seconds to transmit. No, nothing else. Just that single word broadcast across TH. E-Galaxy High Admiral Korvax took personal command of the Coalition fleet. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a strategist who had studied military history from 1,000 worlds. He knew that humans were clever and had demonstrated surprising capability, but he was confident that superior technology and overwhelming numbers would prevail. The Coalition fleet gathered at the Nexus Point, a major jump node leading into human space. Their plan was straightforward: jump in massive force, destroy human military assets, force surrender. It was the same strategy that had worked countless times against species who challenged Council authority. What Korvax didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for exactly this scenario. Admiral Taeyong had spent 3 weeks positioning forces, laying traps, and preparing for the largest military engagement in human history. They'll jump in together, Taeyong told his senior commanders during final briefing. They'll expect us to meet them in defensive formations, fighting a traditional fleet engagement. Instead, we're going to tear their fleet apart before they even understand what's happening. The Nexus Point had been seeded with thousands of human devices over the past 3 weeks. Not explosives, but something more subtle: sensor spoofers, communication jammers, and gravity well generators. Equipment that would turn the battlefield into chaos the moment the Coalition arrived. The Coalition fleet jumped on schedule, 1,200 ships appearing simultaneously in a perfect formation for exactly 10 seconds. Everything went according to their plan. Then the chaos began. Navigation systems throughout the Coalition fleet went haywire. Ships that should have emerged in tight formation found themselves scattered across a light minute of space. Communication networks were jammed, leaving commanders unable to coordinate with their forces. Sensors filled with false contacts, making it impossible to distinguish real threats from ghosts. High Admiral Korvax stood on his command ship's bridge, watching his perfect fleet formation dissolve into scattered groups. What's happening? Restore communications immediately. We're trying, sir. Something is jamming every frequency, and our navigation systems are showing impossible readings. It's like space itself is distorted. Before Korvax could respond, the human attack began. Human ships appeared from above and below the galactic plane, from angles that traditional military doctrine considered pointless because space has no up or down. But human tactical thinking wasn't limited by tradition. They used 3-dimensional space in ways the Coalition didn't expect. Captain, Hannah's squadron hit a Krathani battlecruiser from 6 different vectors simultaneously. The insectoid ship's shields, powerful enough to resist direct fire from its front arc, couldn't handle concentrated fire from multiple angles. Within minutes, the battlecruiser's shields collapsed. Human boarding teams launched immediately. They didn't try to capture the ship. They planted demolition charges in critical systems and withdrew, leaving the Krathani vessel crippled and drifting. This pattern repeated across the battlefield. Human ships attacked in coordinated packs, targeting sensors and communications first, then weapons and engines. They didn't try to match the Coalition's firepower. They overwhelmed defenses through coordination and speed. High Admiral Korvax finally re-established communication with part of his fleet. All vessels reform on my position. We'll consolidate and push through to human space together. It took an hour to gather his scattered forces, and by then, the Coalition had lost 15% of its strength to human hit-and-run attacks. But Korvax was confident that once his fleet reformed, superior firepower would turn the battle. That was when Admiral Taeyong sprung the real trap: the human battle fleet. 300 ships, including carriers and dreadnoughts that Council intelligence didn't know existed, emerged from hiding in a nearby asteroid field. They appeared behind the Coalition's position, targeting supply ships and command vessels that Korvax had thought were safely behind his main force. "Concentrate fire on their logistics," Taiyang ordered. "Without supplies, their advanced ships become very expensive debris." The Coalition's supply vessels, designed for transport rather than combat, were destroyed within the first hour. Command ships, built for coordination rather than defense, found themselves fighting for survival. Korvax's flagship took damage from mast railgun fire that his shields couldn't fully absorb. The battle turned into a nightmare for the Coalition. They were fighting an enemy that refused to engage in traditional fleet combat. Human ships appeared, struck, and vanished before the Coalition could bring their superior weapons to bear. Cyber attacks continued disrupting systems. Supply lines were collapsing, and across human space, Coalition ships discovered something terrifying. There were no safe areas. Human vessels attacked supply convoys in supposedly secure zones. Outposts were sabotaged from within by operatives who had been positioned months ago. Operative Queuing, still embedded in Verlian space, led a team that destroyed a major ammunition depot. The explosion took out supplies meant to support the Coalition fleet for months. Similar attacks happened across 6 star systems simultaneously. The Shardborn, whose crystalline ships could regenerate minor damage, found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't inflict minor damage. Human boarding teams used demolition charges specifically designed to shatter crystal matrices beyond any hope of regeneration. Beautiful ships that had lasted for centuries were reduced to fragments in minutes. The Tideborn, masters of 3-dimensional combat formations, faced human ships that coordinated attacks through networked AI systems. The humans moved as if they shared a single mind, calculating angles and timing with mechanical precision. Individual human ships were less capable than Tideborn vessels. Together, they were devastating. Dr. Mingy watched the battle from Earth, monitoring how her weapons performed in actual combat. The networked AI systems were working even better than hoped. Human ships coordinated with an efficiency that looked impossible to outside observers. "They're calling it swarming," her assistant reported, reviewing Coalition communications they had intercepted. "Their analysts have never seen fleet coordination like this." "That's because they abandoned military AI centuries ago after it caused problems," Minji said. "We fixed those problems. Now we have the advantage of technology they refuse to use." 2 weeks into the battle, High Admiral Korvax faced an impossible situation. His fleet was down to 720 ships. Human losses were lighter than projected. His supply lines were collapsing. Reports came in daily of human raids in supposedly safe council space. Worse, the Coalition was fracturing politically. The Tideborn were quietly discussing withdrawal. The Shardborn were horrified by their losses. Even some Vrelian commanders were questioning the wisdom of continuing the campaign. Korvax sent an encrypted message back to the Vrelian Empire: "Recommend immediate negotiations. The humans are far more capable than intelligence indicated. Continuing this campaign will result in catastrophic losses." The response from Vrelian High Command was harsh. "Victory or resignation, Admiral. The Empire does not negotiate from weakness." But Korvax was a good enough commander to know when a battle was lost. The humans had turned this into a war of attrition, and they were winning. Every day his fleet grew weaker, while human forces remained strong, Captain. Hannah intercepted a Vrelian supply convoy attempting to reach the main fleet. Her squadron surrounded the transport ships, weapons locked and ready. But instead of destroying them, she transmitted a message. "Tell your High Admiral that humanity is willing to discuss terms. After he withdraws completely from human space, we'll even let these supply ships go as a gesture of good faith. But if he continues fighting, we'll continue destroying his fleet piece by piece until nothing remains." The message was delivered. Korvax read it 3 times, anger and shame warring in his mind. The Vrelian Empire had not negotiated from a losing position in centuries. But he was a soldier first, responsible for the lives of hundreds of thousands of crew members. He opened a channel to Admiral Taiyang. "The Coalition fleet is prepared to withdraw from human space to discuss ceasefire terms." "Accepted," Taiyang said simply. But understand this, Admiral. Any violation of the ceasefire will result in immediate resumption of hostilities. And next time, we won't stop at your fleet. We'll bring the war to your worlds. The threat was delivered calmly, without anger or boasting. That made it more terrifying. Korvax believed every word. The coalition withdrew over the next week, carefully monitored by human forces that shadowed them every light year of the way. They left behind 480 destroyed or disabled ships, 67,000 dead, and the shattered remnants of their supply networks. Human losses were 18,9 ships destroyed, 12,000 casualties. Significant but sustainable. More importantly, human industrial capacity was barely affected. They could replace losses within months. As the last coalition ships left human space, Admiral Tai Yang broadcast a final message to the galaxy. Humanity offered peace. The Council chose war. We did not want this conflict, but we finished it. Let this serve as a lesson to any species considering similar actions. We prefer diplomacy. We are capable of war. The choice of which you face is always yours to make. On Earth, the news of victory was met with mixed emotions. Some celebrated the military triumph. Others mourned the thousands who had died. Everyone understood that humanity had changed forever. Minister Suji addressed the human assembly with careful words. We have proven we can defend ourselves. Now we must prove we can build something worthy of that defense. The galaxy will never see us as weak again. But will they see us as wise? That depends on what we do next. In the council chamber, species that had mocked humanity now watched in silence as human strength was undeniable. The minor species, the late bloomers. The talking primates had defeated a coalition of 7 major powers. The galaxy would never be the same. 2 months had passed since the coalition's fleet withdrew from human space. The ceasefire held, though tensions remained high. Across the galaxy, every species was reassessing what they thought they knew about humanity and about the galactic order that had existed for millennia. The council chamber felt different now. Where once the voices of major powers had dominated every discussion, now there was uncertainty. The Varelian Empire had suffered its first major military defeat in living memory. The other coalition species were dealing with political fallout from the failed campaign. And humanity, which had once sat quietly in the corner accepting mockery, now commanded attention whenever they spoke. Dayung walked through the corridors of the council station. Noting how other species moved aside for him now, some showed respect. Others showed fear. A few showed anger barely contained. All showed something they had never shown before, awareness that humanity mattered. The emergency session had been called to discuss the future of human council relations. Daejung entered the chamber and took his seat, no longer in the observation section, but at the main table. The council had granted humanity a provisional seat, acknowledging reality even if they didn't like it. High Admiral Korvax was there too, representing the coalition military. He looked older than he had 2 months ago, the weight of defeat visible in his bearing. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former arrogance. The coalition forces have completed withdrawal from all disputed territories. We have documented our losses: 480 vessels, 67,000 personnel. The human forces demonstrated capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. The Varelian ambassador spoke next, each word clearly painful. The Varelian Empire acknowledges that our assessment of human military capacity was incorrect. We are prepared to discuss new terms for human participation in council affairs. Darjong stood slowly. Around the chamber, representatives of species that had once ignored him now watched carefully. Humanity's terms are straightforward, he said. Full sovereignty over our claimed territories with no council oversight. Formal apology for the New Busan attack and council complicity in protecting the perpetrators. Reparations from coalition species for damages inflicted during their invasion of our space. Establishment of mutual defense treaties on terms of equality, not subordination. And a permanent seat on the Council's Security Directorate with full voting rights. The Krathani representative's mandibles clicked in agitation. These terms are unreasonable. You're demanding treatment as a major power when you control barely 30 star systems. We control 30 star systems and defeated a coalition of 7 major powers, Daejung said quietly. That makes us a major power by any reasonable definition. But if you prefer, we can remain independent and expand our territory without council input. The choice is yours. The chamber fell silent. The threat was clear. Accept humanity as equals, or watch them grow stronger outside council influence. The Luminary Counselor, who had remained silent throughout the war, finally spoke. Perhaps it is time we acknowledge that power is not only measured in number of worlds controlled, but in capability and determination to defend what one has. Humanity has demonstrated both. Over the next 3 weeks, negotiations continued. The council was fracturing, not because of humanity alone, but because humanity's success had exposed weaknesses in the entire system. Several minor species, emboldened by humanity's example, began demanding reforms to council structure. The Bellan Confederation, a group of 12 smaller species, formally requested humanity's assistance in establishing their own independent defense force. They had watched the war and learned a lesson. Superior technology mattered less than coordination training and will to fight. We've lived under council protection for centuries, their representative told Daejung privately. But we've seen how much that protection is worth when the council decides we don't matter. We want to be able to defend ourselves, as you do. Humanity faced a choice. They could focus on their own security and ignore the wider galaxy. Or they could become a different kind of power, one that helped others achieve independence rather than dominating them. Giwan argued passionately for engagement. This is our chance to build something better than what existed before. We fought for our freedom. Now, we can help others achieve theirs without war. Minister Suji convened the Human Assembly to discuss their future role. Admiral Taiyang represented the military perspective, arguing for continued strong defenses and caution in foreign commitments. Dr. Mingi represented the scientific community, suggesting selective technology sharing could prevent future conflicts. Daejung represented the diplomatic corps, advocating for active engagement with the galaxy on humanity's terms. The debate was intense, reflecting genuine disagreement about humanity's path forward. Some wanted isolation, believing the galaxy was too dangerous for deep involvement. Others wanted expansion, arguing that humanity should claim more territory while they had military advantage. Still others wanted a middle path, engagement without subordination. The compromise they reached became known as the New Humanity. Doctrine: maintain overwhelming military capability as guarantee of independence, but pursue diplomatic and economic integration with species willing to treat humanity as equals. Share technology selectively with allies, but never become dependent on galactic institutions that could turn against them. Peace through strength, Minister Suji announced to the Assembly. We will never again be weak enough to be victims, but we won't become conquerors either. We'll be partners with those who want partnership, and we'll be strong enough that no one can force us into submission. The Council, facing pressure from multiple directions, began implementing reforms. The absolute veto power of founding species was modified. Military intervention required supermajority votes instead of simple majority. Minor species gained more representation in decision-making bodies. The Varelian ambassador approached Daejung during a recess in negotiations. You didn't just change humanity's position in the galaxy. You've changed everything. The old order is dying, and I'm not sure what will replace it. Something better, hopefully, Daejung said. A system where species are judged by their capabilities and character, not by how long they've been traveling the stars. Where protection means something real, not empty promises. Where power is balanced, so no one species or group can dominate others. That's idealistic, the Varelian said. Perhaps. But idealism backed by the capability to enforce it becomes reality. The Luminari approached humanity with a private proposal. They had watched the war with concern, seeing in humanity's military efficiency something they had long avoided in themselves. But they also saw an opportunity. They wished to form a mutual defense pact independent of council authority, the Luminari counselor explained to Daejung. We've grown tired of militaristic factions dominating council policy. Your species proved that defense is possible without conquest. We would like to explore partnership. It was the first formal alliance humanity had been offered as equals. After careful consideration, humanity accepted. The Human Luminary Accord became the foundation for a new power block in galactic politics, one based on mutual defense rather than domination. The Crithani, always pragmatic, were the first coalition species to formally recognize humanity's territorial claims and propose direct trade agreements outside council oversight. Their representative made the calculation explicit. Friendship with humanity is more valuable than continuing a conflict we cannot win. Others followed. Within 6 months of the ceasefire, humanity had established formal diplomatic relations with 23 species, independent defense pacts with 4, and trade agreements with dozens more. But not everyone was ready to accept the new order. Some species viewed humanity's rise with suspicion and resentment. Small conflicts erupted as borders shifted and old assumptions collapsed. The galaxy was more unstable than it had been in centuries, though also more dynamic and potentially more just. 1 year after the Battle of New Busan, a memorial ceremony was held at the colony. Families of the 2,000 who died gathered to remember their loved ones. Daejung stood before the monument, simple stone bearing every victim's name. Ji-won joined him, her earlier idealism tempered by the realities she had witnessed. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Daejung took a long time to answer. The lives lost. No. War is never worth its cost in lives and suffering. But what we achieved, ensuring that no species can attack us without facing terrible consequences, that was necessary. If we hadn't responded, more colonies would have been attacked. More families would be standing at monuments like this. Do you think we've become what we fought against? I think we've become something new, Daejung said. Not conquerors, not victims, but a species that knows how to fight, but prefers peace. That's a narrow path to walk, but it's the only honest one available to us. High above the colony, human warships patrolled in formation with luminary vessels. The first independent defense coalition not controlled by the Council was a reality. In orbit of Earth, a new ambassadorial complex was under construction, designed by human and alien architects working together, representing what cooperation could look like when based on equality, Captain Hannah. Now Fleet Admiral Hannah oversaw the Frontier Defense Force from her flagship. Her orders were clear: prevent war through readiness, but if war came, win decisively and quickly. Every officer under her command knew the doctrine: humans preferred peace, but they perfected war. Dr. Minji's research had shifted from weapons development to collaborative projects with allied species. Her team was working on medical technology, agricultural improvements, and terraforming methods. But the weapons research continued too, ensuring humanity's military edge remained sharp. The lesson had been learned: never be weak enough to be a victim again. Across human space, life was returning to normal, though normal had changed fundamentally. Children learned military training alongside mathematics and literature. Colonies built defense stations alongside farms and cities. Humanity had become a warrior culture without losing its humanity, a balance that required constant attention. The galaxy was different too. The Council continued to exist, but its absolute authority was broken. Multiple power blocks had formed, creating a more balanced, if more complicated, political structure. Wars still happened. The old pattern of major powers dominating minor ones was harder to maintain. Some species resented the changes. The Vrelian Empire struggled with loss of prestige and influence. Others embraced new opportunities, grateful that someone had finally challenged the old order successfully in the council chamber. Debates continued about trade, territory, and the 1,000 details of galactic governance, but now when humanity spoke, others listened. When human representatives proposed changes, those proposals received serious consideration. The quiet species was quiet no more. Daejung stood before the council one final time before rotating back to Earth for new assignments. He had been asked to give a closing statement summarizing humanity's position going forward. His words were recorded for the archives, becoming known as the New Humanity Statement. We came to the stars hoping for friendship. We found contempt. You mistook our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for fear, our silence for submission. You taught us that in this galaxy, only the strong are respected. We learned that lesson well, perhaps too well. We prefer peace, but we are capable of war. We build civilizations, but we can defend them with absolute commitment. We sought cooperation, but we learned self-reliance. We offered respect, but we earned it through strength. This is who we are now, forged by our experiences among the stars. We are humanity. We came in peace. We stay through strength, and we will never, ever be dismissed again. The recording ended. Across the galaxy, species watched and understood. The age when humanity could be mocked was over. Whether that was progress or tragedy depended on perspective, it was undeniably real. Dai Jung returned to Earth, where he took a position training the next generation of diplomats. He taught them that strength and wisdom must balance, that power without morality leads to tyranny, but morality without power leads to victimhood. Admiral Tai Yang remained in command of military operations, ensuring humanity's fleet stayed sharp and ready. He knew that the price of peace was eternal vigilance, that the moment humanity became complacent would be the moment enemies tested them again. Juan continued her work in cultural exchange, building bridges with species willing to see humanity as partners. She believed, perhaps naively, but honestly, that the galaxy could become better than it had been, that humanity's example might inspire reforms beyond military matters. Minister Suji governed with the careful balance required of leaders who understood both humanity's capabilities and its responsibilities. Under her guidance, humanity expanded carefully, defended strongly, and cooperated where possible. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the quiet species. They had been silent not from weakness, but from patience. They had been peaceful not from inability to fight, but from choice to avoid it. And when that patience ended and that choice was taken away, they had proven to be among the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they had the best technology or the biggest fleets, but because they understood something others had forgotten, that wars are won not by those with superior weapons, but by those with superior will to use whatever weapons they have without hesitation or mercy when truly threatened. The galaxy would remember, and humanity would never forget what silence had cost them, or what strength had won them. They were no longer the mocked species, the late bloomers, the talking primates. They were humanity, and the stars themselves had learned to respect that name.